I'm going to read a little bit from Rajarshi Janakananda's own words. And he describes this path that Paramahansa Yogananda gave. And it's interesting because he describes it so succinctly as Yogananda taught it and gave it, and also as Krishna in the Gita gave it. And I'll just read what Rajarshi says. On the path of self-realization, one becomes alive again. He actually lives. He feels the divine life within him. He experiences the union of his individual soul with the universal spirit. The self-realization path, as taught by Paramahansa Ji, is scientific. It is a combination of yoga, a science that is practiced within one's own being, and devotion to God. Together, yoga and devotion will bring man to a realization of his own divinity. Religion can have but one purpose: knowledge of one's own life in the omnipresent Spirit. I am firmly of this opinion. Without making a successful effort to achieve soul realization, man cannot win salvation or final freedom in spirit. Now, Rajarshi is almost quoting from the Bhagavad Gita here. Rajarshi was, according to Yogananda, he was, I believe it was Nakula, one of the five Pandavas, and therefore an associate, disciple, devotee of the Lord is Krishna. And what Rajarshi says here echoes a passage from the Gita, which I will read also. This path is a combination of yoga, a science that is practiced within one's own being, and devotion to God. Together, yoga and devotion will bring man to a realization of his own divinity. And this is what Krishna says in the Gita, chapter 12, stanzas 6 and 7. He says that the yogi will find God when they have, quote, their minds concentrated on me by yoga practice and their heart's feelings uplifted to me in devotion. People often don't realize how really the essence of Yogananda's path can be put into that very simple passage. It can be put into what Rajarshi Janakananda said. It can be put into what our own Guru said when he talked about his experience of cosmic consciousness. He again quotes almost the Gita, but paraphrasing it. He says, only adequate enlargement by yoga practice and devotional bhakti can prepare the mind to absorb the liberating shock of omnipresence. And so this is, to me, my experience of Yogananda's path has been that it really is a remarkable marriage of self-effort, concentration, yoga practice, Kriya Yoga, inner yoga practice is what he's talking about, not the Hatha Yoga so much, but this inner yoga practice of the meditation, the Kriya Yoga that Krishna also taught and Christ taught also to their disciples. And it does take self-effort. But when we combine our self-effort with this devotional self-offering, and in a way the greatest self-effort that we can do is to gain control of our heart's feelings, our desires, our attachments, our restless thoughts, everything. We can gain control of our entire self through yoga practice, and offer ourselves with complete willingness and giving to the divine in deep devotion. We cannot give what we do not own. This is just so important to understand why we have this path of yoga. We cannot give what we do not own, and we cannot give ourselves to God with devotional offering and merging back into God until we own ourselves, until we own our restless thoughts, our restless desires and attachments that are always seeking this thing or that thing, chasing one thing after another. And I'll read something that Rajarshi says about that. And so this is really the essence of what Yogananda gave, because it's so unusual. I think those of us who have been following this path, I've been following this since about the age of 20. It's been a long time. And I haven't had much opportunity to learn other paths, but I grew up in a Christian church and I've been exposed to a few other paths. And most teachings emphasize one or the other. Self-effort, lifting yourself up by your own bootstraps, and a lot of the New Age is affirmation and self-effort. And yes, if we just put out the right positive thinking and change our lives and change our destiny, but then devotion is often not there. And others talk about only devotion and only grace is what frees us. And all we have to do is, as many Christians say, be born again, and then God will do the rest. And that it's a very passive expression of that. Yogananda talked about it as a man he knew who was a bhakti yogi. And this man was only practiced devotion. And Yogananda advised him to learn Kriya Yoga. Again, yoga, self-effort, plus that devotional offering. And the man said, no, I'm a bhakti yogi. I don't need yoga. I don't need these things. And Yogananda understood that this was a great soul. And so he kept trying to convince this man. And finally, he did. He gave the man initiation into Kriya Yoga. And then 2 weeks later, the man came back with tears in his eyes. He said for the first time in his life of spiritual seeking, of deep devotion, true deep devotion, but he finally had the vision of God for the first time. And this is because that formula again of yoga science plus devotional bhakti, self-effort plus devotion, gets us into this extremely strong river of divine grace. And to go out into that river of divine grace, we have to put out the effort to swim out into that current, to swim out into that river, and the right kind of effort. And this is what, again, Rajarshi was talking about, Lord Krishna was talking about, Yogananda was talking about. And it really combines these two things in a way that is not yoga at one time, devotion at another. In the end, we see that it's Kriya Yoga, for example, is done with devotional offering. And concentration means concentrating our heart's feelings on God by offering them up with this intense yearning and giving and freedom. In, again, yoga science, concentration, practice of techniques, but done with the deepest devotion. I'll read something else that Rajarshi said. I would rather keep silent than say very much. I would rather feel and realize than talk. How many people would rather talk than feel and realize? It's just, there's so much chatter in this world and people just love talking so much. And Rajarshi, when he was with Yogananda, he was almost always in silence and stillness, and Yogananda was too. They had an inner communion that was so much deeper than talking philosophy and words and just endless chattering. They were two very deep souls, and deep souls understand that silence and stillness is the altar of spirit. Anandamoyi Ma, the great Bengali saint, one time said that as long as we're talking, we're only on the surface of the mind. We're only on the surface. And in order to go deep, we need to be in silence and spend long periods in silence. I would really recommend having a day each week when you can be in silence. Have time even with family, where you just, as a family, you just are more still and more in silence. It's possible. I can tell you it's possible. I was married to a Kriya Yogi for 25 years before she left the body. And we spent most of our time in silence. Even when we were just eating or being around the house, it was just almost entirely in silence. Because I think we both understood that inner communion with God, but even with other people, is actually much deeper when it's in stillness and silence. I've noticed this, that people who I've spent years meditating with, even though I may not ever talk to them, or I may not even see them in 10 years with a visit to the US, for example, if I've meditated with them a lot over the years, or even many years ago, there's an instant connection, because that soul connection is just much deeper than just an intellectual one, or a verbal one, or one on the level of ideas. So I'll finish this, what Rajarshi said. I would rather keep silent than say very much. I would rather feel and realize than talk. Feel, that's so important, isn't it? Swami Kriyananda said God is feeling, and that feeling is Satchidananda, divine bliss. And so we have to work with feeling, again, with devotion. But today, I would like to tell you a little bit about the blessings that come to one from self-realization teachings. The first blessing is calmness. We cannot have peace without poise. In 1932, when I first met Paramhansa Yogananda, I was afflicted with extreme nervousness. Since that time, one of the greatest joys that has come into my life is serenity. Everyone I know now can be calm and peaceful. And again, you will find that I don't think it's possible to have that type of peace and calmness without a great deal of time consciously spent in silence. As a boy, I lived in the country. I had some hound dogs whose sense of smell was very keen. Every time they smelled the game they were tracking, they would give a yelp. That is how people of the world act. Those who live in the senses, they give a yelp whenever they have sensations of pleasure or pain. They have not learned that true life and joy do not depend on sensory experiences. We must find the source of happiness and joy, and that source is God. So even in addition to meditation time when we are silent, find other times to be silent. Go for walks by yourself where you're just silent and just communing inwardly with God, and you will find that's where the real depth comes, when you can be silent even in the midst of activity. And you will find that your intuition awakens, you start to understand people more deeply rather than just on the surface of the mind, and you'll find also that you start to feel and realize God more deeply in that stillness and in that silence. So Premdas will now share a few things also.
Thank you, Devashiji, for sharing on this aspect. So the silence and stillness, how important it is. I think with even with little practice of meditation, we just realize that how much deep these things can affect our entire life and our entire family, people, and whoever we interact with all through the day. So today I had this small plan of reading to you a poem written by Paramhansa Yogananda ji to Rajarshi Janakananda ji. So first I would just like you to tense your entire body with a double breath so that we fill our bodies and relax it. Few more times. Now just close your eyes gently uplifted. Try to tune into that stillness, that calmness of Rajarshi ji, Master. As I read out this poem, keep your eyes closed. Just think that Master is writing to the Rajarshi in all of us. The little one is the name by which he used to call Rajarshi ji. Paramhansa Yogananda ji writes in this poem, my little one, you and I are one. In Mother Supreme, in her eternity stream, when this earth melts in the cosmic dust and our bodies dissolve as they must, still our souls as blended starlit will shine, forever, ever expanding in the divine. This life is not only a dream, but a dream that already has come and gone in the mind of the Divine One. Thus do I behold with eternity's eyes of old all our earthly business pressures, scant successes, struggles, and nightmares, all already dissolved in time's cosmic molten stream, flowing from her cosmic dream. You and I, though I, are no more here in this cosmic motion picture. Since you're gone, there is no worry, struggle none, only to calmly remember we dreamt our dream and now we are with her, only her. Dreams are disturbing and hard to take, but each dreamer should dream half awake. Nightmares and beautiful dreams are true a while, but never as they seem, so good or bad, whatever be coming. Remember, you are dreaming, only dreaming. This dream lies that we are here, prisoners of a clot of earth, chained to life and death, while we are already free everywhere. This delusion that tells salvation and freedom are far away, this wisdom and knows we dwell in everlasting freedom now and always. In wakefulness of Samadhi's light, forget all dreams of the cosmic night. You and I, free forever, now, even now, in the cosmic mother, where we are, no scratch of worries can ever come near. You and I, forever are, shining in her love's altar. Just continue to just meditate on these words of Paramahansa Yogananda ji, feeling we all in the presence of Divine Mother, free even now, filled with peace and bliss. Peace. Om Shanti Shanti. Please gently open your eyes. Just tuning into these masters and very helpful practice. So whenever you get time, do tune into all of our masters and saints in our path, Sister Gyanamata, Rajarshi ji, and also have their company sometimes when you don't have company. This is one small thing I did once, and I still cherish that memory. Once I had to go help with purchasing a photo frame for Swamiji because in Vatunde, and we had gone to Pune, and this time I just like for fun just experimented with this, and for some reason it was Rajeshi's maybe his birthday, and so I was just communicating and trying to in my mind trying to call out to Rajeshi ji and say please come and we'll try to buy this photo frame together. And then the whole experience of choosing the frame and the way it took, the way the communication happened with the shopkeeper, and the way the entire day flowed, and there was peace and joy. And I think it was his energy, and the photo frame really came out very well. Even the shopkeeper was delighted to see how well it came out, the final print. And yeah, so Whenever we have their presence and their energy, it just comes out more better compared to when we just keep putting out our effort. Like Devashiji said, like it's both combination of self-effort as well as the grace and devotion, everything combined. So I would also like to read to you of Rajeshi's words. This is at a 1953 convocation. Rajeshi says, addressing to the people, all that I have to give you is the spirit of Master and of God. I have nothing more to say, nothing more to do, except to carry out the wishes of that Master had for this great movement. And what he's doing for you these days is not of me. I myself am only his little one that he spoke of, and I shall never be more than a little one, because it will always be Master Paramahansaji, who is my life and my blessing to you all. I think I might be. I'll just re-narrate the story, which you might have heard many times about how one's master asks Rajarshi, "Where does your power come from?" And Rajarshi, very this thing with right away says, "From you, master." So when we realize that power coming from God and masters into our being, into doing any activity, it just gets better and better. There's joy, there's more this thing, and some of our ego doesn't get it. Just the free flowing energy of the entire cosmos with the help of masters that flows through us using this thing. And also one more this thing. So I would also like to read to you. This is a sacred experience that Rajarshi had with masters, and he just shares in this book. I would like to read to you this. This was on January 5th, 1954. Rajeshi experienced this on master's birthday. So I awoke around 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning on January 5th and saw Lahiri Mahashaya in the greatest blaze of light in which he has ever manifested to me. Then one by one, Shri Yukteswar, Babaji, and Master appeared. Master lifted me out of the body and we floated together over many gatherings of people. Master blessed each group as we floated over it. We were not walking, but floating overhead. It seemed as though Master wanted all the people to know that I was with him. I was with Master a long time, for from 2 or 3 o'clock until 9 o'clock, the longest I've ever been with him in this way. Master is very busy there, just as busy as he was when he lived here, helping the people in those other spheres, teaching them the way of salvation, how to achieve their own self-realization. Yeah. Master Rajesh has revealed many secrets in this small this thing where he shares that how Master is still busy helping other devotees there, and how he has promised to Rajesh in all his letters that even when he's in this physical form, taking him all over that experience and blessing all the people along with him. And this also reminds me of I think one of this. I can't remember completely, but this is about Saint Francis of Assisi and how during the time he lived in the utmost humility and his garb wasn't well, or it was mostly torn and everything. But in the other sphere, when this devotee or somebody had a vision, he could see that Saint Francis or these saints to be colored in this the most brilliant light, and he was leading the group or something. How sometimes it's not always this outer manifestations, but some of the divine light and what you do on this planet. Like Rajeshiji was able to serve so much and to be able to be a better channel and to experience samadhi even while on this sphere. So how Master took care of him even in the other spheres, and how he's still taking care of all of us. Somehow, if we try to keep tuning in to that reality, and he'll keep trying to help us until we are open and we invite him. Let's try to keep inviting him in our lives to meditate and to be a better channels, and the life is life is truly wonderful then. So now I would also request Devashi back to share some few more closing words. Yeah.
Add one more thing about that vision that Rajarshi had. Imagine ourselves in that gathering of people, or just imagine yourself at home. And what would happen if Rajarshi, Master Babaji, Sri Yukteswar, Lahiri Mahashai, they all floated overhead? Where would you be looking? Where do you look most of the time? Are you looking down most of the time, or looking at the internet most of the time, or are you caught up in moods, or just, oh gosh, where is Master? Why doesn't he come to me? And maybe sometimes we do sit around saying, oh gosh, Master never comes and he won't come to me, and poor me. And the whole time maybe he's floating right overhead at that very moment, but we're not looking up. And so just learn to always be looking up, to be looking up to the light, to be looking towards God, to be offering ourselves to the light and to God. And you'll find that when you do that, you'll start to see God more. Not all the time, but you will start to see God more. I used to go on many walks in my former home at Ananda Village in California. And it was in nature. It was very beautiful, natural forest, trees, wild animals all over the place. And my wife and I would go for a walk. And again, our walks were always in silence. And we would talk. It wasn't just going on a walk. Let's go on an expedition. And it was just so much anticipation, like, what are we going to see today? And we were always receptive and looking, and we wouldn't always see something. In fact, maybe most of the time we wouldn't, except just in the effort to look for something beautiful, we would always, just whether it was just the way that a blade of grass reflected light in the sunset, or just a very simple, flower in a meadow that was just by itself and very humble. And sometimes it was more spectacular, whether it was some baby deer or a huge, gigantic owl sitting on a distant tree. Sometimes it would be more magical. But we don't find unless we seek. Seek and you shall find. We don't see it unless we look. And so we would not see Master and the great Masters floating overhead. They may be floating overhead right now at this very moment. And we're just, again, on the surface of the mind because we're talking. And so the more we have that depth, that stillness, the looking for God, rather than yelping like those hound dogs of Rajarshi who would chase after every smell of the food they were chasing after. Instead, their sense of smell, their eyes, their sight, we're always looking for God in the heart and feeling, in others, in service to others. And the more that we do that, the more common it becomes to be able to see God, to be able to feel God. And that only comes from looking as much as we can, as often as we can, especially looking up and having our consciousness up. If our consciousness is elevated, then our consciousness is closer to where they are. When our consciousness is heavy and pulling down, then it's going away from them. And so this is our part. This is the part of yoga science, self-effort, and looking with devotion for God, for the Divine Mother, for the Guru, for Krishna, wherever we go, in the eyes of others and in people that we see. So this is this path of self-effort, looking, striving, trying, doing it with self-offering and devotion. And this is the beauty of this sacred path that our great Master Paramhansa Yogananda gave us, and as so well exemplified in his greatest disciple, Rajarshi Janakananda. So it's been a joy sharing with you this month on this great disciple of Master. Next month will be a new topic.